ስለ ኢትዮጵያና ኢትዮጵያዊነት በሆኑ ማህበራዊ ፖለቲካዊና ኢኮኖሚያዊ መድረኮች ሁሉ አባይ ሚዲያ ይገኛል። እርሶም በዝግጅቱ ወቅት የሚያስተላልፉት መልእክት ወይንም ሐሳብ በመላው ዓለም ለሚገኙ ኢትዮጵያኖች በጥራትና በፍጥነት እንዲተላለፍ ከፈለጉ ምርጫውን አባይ ሚዲያን ያድርጉ። ዝግጅት ሲኖሮት በስልክ ቁጥራችን 617 669 2407 ይደውሉልን ወይንም በኢሜል አድራሻችን live@abbaymedia.com ይጻፉልን በፍጥነት ይደርሰናል። አባይ ሚዲያ ሁሉም ነገር ስለ ኢትዮጵያ።
All right, let's do it.
Okay, good.
ናስተልን ክብር እንግዶቻችን ዛሬ በዴንቨር ኮሎራዶ እንግዲህ የምንገኘው አባይ ሚዲያ አቶ ጄሰን ክሮ የዴሞክራቲክ ፓርቲ ፕራይመሪ አሸንፈው ከከባድ ግንኙነት ላይ ከኮንግረስመን ኮፍመን ጋር የሚያካሂዱት ዝግጅት ላይ ነው የምንገኘው። ዛሬ እንግዲህ በአርብ ዕለት አቶ ጄሰን ክሮ እዚህ ጋብዘውን እነሱ ኦፊስ መተን ለእናንተ ስለሳቸው ለማስተዋወቅ በጣም ደስ ብሎናል እና እንግዲህ እሳቸውን ከእናንተ ጋር እየጋበዝናችሁ መልካም ጊዜ እናሳልፋለን ከእናንተ ጋር። Mr. Jason Crow, salam.
Salam. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having us. Mr. Crow, basically what we want to do is first, I want to introduce you to our community here in the District 6 area. Could you please briefly tell me about yourself, your family, and your background?
Of course. I'm a first-time candidate. I've never run for anything before, let alone a congressional race like this. I grew up in a working-class family, worked in construction to help put my way through college, so I learned what it's like to work very hard and 100-degree heat. Actually developed the calluses that I still have on my hands to this day. I became an Army Ranger, served 3 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan in service of America. And then I came home and used my veterans benefits to go to law school. I became a veterans advocate in the community. I actually worked hard with a lot of veterans leaders throughout the community to help bring the funding for the new VA hospital here in North Aurora. And I'm also now a parent. So my wife and I are very proud parents of a 5-year-old and 8-year-old. And I think like every parent, we view the world through the eyes of our children. So a lot of the policies, a lot of what we're trying to accomplish during this campaign are focused on promoting family-friendly policies and promoting education and healthcare and immigration reform so we can have strong families and a strong community.
Fantastic. And what is your current field right now?
I'm a lawyer right now.
You're a lawyer. And which law firm do you represent?
I work for the law firm of Holland and Hart, which is based right here in Denver.
Fantastic. Well, Mr. Crow, let's get to it then. What we want to ask is a few questions that we've reached out to the local community here in Colorado and see what they need from Mr. Crow. What is their fight, or what are they looking for Mr. Crow to represent? So our first question will be, education and healthcare matter to our community. What are your stands on pre-existing as well as healthcare in general?
Yeah, so the first part of that was the education piece, and I have to say that I'm a product of public schools. I wouldn't be here today, and I wouldn't be running for Congress if I didn't have very strong neighborhood public schools, because education is really the foundation for success and prosperity in America. And we need to make sure that we do have strong public schools, that regardless of where you live, what your zip code is, the color of your skin, or where you came from, you have the same opportunities as everybody else. And then on healthcare, I approach this from a very different principle than my opponent. I believe that healthcare is a human right. I don't believe it's a privilege. And I don't think anybody in America should go bankrupt or should die because they can't afford quality, affordable healthcare. So that means that we need to have a Congress that's going to defend and support the Affordable Care Act, defend the progress that we've made over the last 8 years that added 600,000 people to the healthcare rolls right here in Colorado, 20 million throughout the country, and then build on that. I think we have to have a federal public option that people can buy into that will increase competition and reduce costs. And we have to protect the Medicaid expansion and Medicare benefits. My opponent voted to reduce Medicare by $800 billion and wants to reduce the Medicaid expansion and move it to a block grant, which will mean cuts for many people, many of the most vulnerable people in our community that need health care the most.
That's good news, sir. What are your stands on early childhood education and really the most outrageous cost in state college and universities right now? What will you tell your District 6 what you plan to do about that?
Yeah, early childhood education is a part of that strong public education system that I talked about earlier. I mean, the data on this is overwhelming and resounding, that when you have strong early childhood education, the child and the family do much better. They succeed later in life. They're less likely to fall into the criminal justice system. They're healthier. It has benefits for the family as well. So we do need to be making investments into things like Head Start. Head Start's provided very fundamental programs and services and education to folks in our community that need it the most. Unfortunately, under this administration, they want to cut programs like that and many others that will hit the most vulnerable people in our community the hardest, and I will fight to make sure that that doesn't happen. And then on college debt, my wife and I, neither my wife or I come from money. We at one point had over $100,000 in student loans. And there's a lot of young people that are in that same position. They graduate from college or their training program, and they have over $1,000 a month just to pay the interest on those loans. So we need to be looking at a student loan repayment for people that want to go into high demand careers like healthcare. We don't have enough doctors and nurses and home health care aides in the country and community and in Colorado right now. And if you want to go in to be a teacher, so if you want to go into public service or go into a high demand career, we need to be looking at programs that will help repay loans for those young folks so they can go in and serve our community.
Thank you, sir. Gonna change it up on you at this point, and I want to ask you about the Trump administration seems to be taking a harsh stand on immigration currently. Can you explain your stance on family-related visas, the dreamers, as well as the undocumented immigrants? What kind of message do you have for your District 6 that where will soon to be Jason Crow, where will he stand for us?
Well, I believe that the diversity of our community is the strength of our community. Over the last 19 months, I've attended over 300 community and public events. I've gone to the Taste of Ethiopia several times. I've visited your churches. I've met with your religious and community leaders, and it's become very clear to me that you share our values, that the strength of this community is in the small businesses, in the entrepreneurs that are building businesses and raising their families, and I'm going to promote that. And as a father, I also firmly believe that the strength of our community is related to the strength of our families, and that a fundamental principle of our immigration system has to be family unity. So supporting DV, a lot of the people in our community and in the Ethiopian community in particular rely on DV to unite their families, to bring over their spouses, their husbands, their wives, their children, their grandparents. We cannot cut that program. Donald Trump and my opponent want to cut that program because we need to keep families strong.
Thanks, sir. You mentioned your opponent. Congressman Kaufman has worked very hard in getting to know the Ethiopian community here locally, and he worked tirelessly in the passage of HR 128. Will you also support democratic forces in Ethiopia and discourage those that are ethnic-based former regime from causing havoc in Ethiopia through their paid agents? Obviously.
Yeah, I do want to continue the progress and fight for human rights, fight for political expression, fight for free journalism and democratic principles that we have here at home that we need to be supporting in Ethiopia and everywhere in the world. When I was an Army Ranger, I fought in Iraq and Afghanistan for democracy and human rights. I've seen places of the world where people don't have freedom of expression, where there is no rule of law, where political prisoners are in prison for voicing their rights. And I know what that looks like, and I know we can never tolerate that anywhere in the world. So I will continue to push for reforms. I will work with the administration of Prime Minister Abiy to build on those reforms, to move forward, to support the Ethiopian, Eritrean peace and unification efforts. And you know, we have a major problem right now in this administration, because the reforms that have been made and the things that were outlined in H.R. 128 are being undermined by this administration. They require actions by the UN Human Rights Council, but the United States pulled out of the UN Human Rights Council this year. So we can't even implement elements of that because we've turned our back on that council. You know, it calls on the State Department to build democracy and institutions in Ethiopia. But at the same time, this administration is proposing to cut the State Department budget by more than 25%, over $14 billion, $1.6 billion of that for food aid. So at the time where we need to be making investments and focusing on the institutions and our agencies that will actually carry out those elements of democracy building and supporting change in Ethiopia and other places, we're actually doing the opposite. We're turning our back, we're pulling the money back, and we are losing our ability to do any of those things.
Okay. You mentioned the new Prime Minister of Ethiopia. How do you see him so far? How is the new Prime Minister, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, doing so far in your way?
I'm very encouraged. And I'm new to this, and I'm learning along the campaign trail here, but in my many discussions with leaders within the community here, there's great optimism that he's releasing political prisoners, that he is doing things like appointing 50% of the cabinet officers as women. You know, actually leading by example and doing things that show inclusion and show democracy and are consistent with the principles that we have here in America as well. So I'm actually encouraged, and I look forward to working with his administration to continue to do that and see what resources they need and support that they need from America to continue those reforms.
As you know, Prime Minister Abiy has been in the office roughly for about 6 months. And he's having to deal with old guards who are unwilling to accept change and are very active, causing havoc throughout in corners of Ethiopia. Sir, if you are elected to the United States Congress, in what ways can you help Prime Minister Abiy to continue moving the country in the right direction?
We need to have the institutions and the ability here in America to provide him support. You know, if we don't have a strong State Department, if we don't have a commitment to the UN Human Rights Commission, if we don't have funding and USAID to actually go to Ethiopia and provide them with funding and support to build their institutions, to build their courts, to make the reforms and make the investments that he needs us to make in the country and his administration to carry out the reforms and to move forward, he won't be able to do that. So what I want to do is actually reach out to the administration. I'd love to hear directly from them as to what they need, what support that they would like from the U.S. But I also want to be very careful that we don't interfere in that process too. You know, the United States, in some instances, does not have a very good track record of getting involved overseas, and I don't want to interfere with his process and what they're trying to do to unify the country right now.
Should you win in November, will you continue to engage with the Ethiopian community in your District 6, and what can that community expect from Congressman Crow?
Yeah, I absolutely will continue to engage. And this has to do with my approach to leadership in general. I believe in a collaborative approach to leadership. And that means that you have to surround yourself with people that know the issues better than you do, that have lived the issues. And I'm going to create a series of community councils that I will meet with and convene regularly that will include leaders from the Ethiopian community, so I can listen to them, that we can have discussions, we can see what legislation needs to happen to support their community, just like I will the many other communities. There's over 130 languages spoken in this district. Again, the strength in this community is in its diversity, and I need to have regular discussions and continue to reach out to the community in the way that I have been. You I made that commitment on day one of this campaign, and I fulfilled that commitment by reaching out actively and attending hundreds of community events. And I'm going to continue to do that. And the last piece is I'm going to build a congressional office that reflects the community. So I'd love to have representatives working in the office that reflect the various groups around CD6 so that we can meet constituent services needs. We can be serving the people on the ground here. We can also be developing policy and legislation in Washington that meets the needs of the larger community and of America, and do it in a responsible way.
Okay. I think you took me to the next question. Basically, then, what steps will you take to advocate the various immigrant groups that live in your district? Like you've indicated, we have many various immigrants in your community. What kind of steps will you take, if you can mention a few of them for us?
There are things that just have to get done. We have to pass the DREAM Act. You know, our dreamers cannot continue to have the unpredictability and the lack of security that the last few years has failed them on. We have to pass the DREAM Act. We need comprehensive immigration reform. You know, the 11 million folks that are here undocumented need to have a path to citizenship or permanent residency. We need to get that done. You know, so there are very fundamental things that have to get done on immigration, on healthcare, on climate change, on environmental protection that are not happening because of the people that we've been sending to Washington. And it would be a very big mistake, in my view, if we somehow think, with this administration, the Trump administration controlling DC right now, that we will solve any of these issues, and that we will restore accountability back to Washington, DC by sending the same people back there that have brought us this mess and have failed to address these issues. There's nothing that leads me to believe that sending the same people back will somehow finally solve the issues we've been waiting so long for them to solve. We need a new generation of leadership to go there. People that haven't been serving their lives in politics, but have built businesses, raised families, served this country in uniform, that know how to work across party lines, to develop coalitions of Republicans, Democrats, independents, people from the Ethiopian community, the Hispanic community, bring everybody together and get it done.
Mr. Crow, I certainly appreciate it. I just have a couple of questions for you, 2 minutes. I know we have to wrap this up. First, I want to thank you for your service in the military. With that, my next question is, how do you propose America balances our soft power to our military power? How do you propose that? And then to sum it up, you mentioned Congressman Kaufman. If you can just sum in a quick, what is the difference between Congressman Kaufman and Mr. Crow? What is the difference? Just a quick feedback on that.
Yeah, you know, the question of military power versus the other tools in our arsenal. You know, we have economic tools, we have diplomatic tools, we have humanitarian aid tools, and we have military tools. I'm of the belief that we have put way too much emphasis on just the military component and have neglected the other very important tools that we have to promote democracy and security around the world, our humanitarian and our diplomatic capabilities. You know, Secretary Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, actually said it best a year ago when he said, if you cut the State Department budget, you're going to have to buy me more bullets. So we need people in Congress that understand that we have to leverage all of those tools at the same time. There are certainly instances where we need our military to intervene and to stop human rights abuses, to protect our country and our border, but we also have to be making the investments in humanitarian and diplomatic efforts to create a more peaceful world.
Fantastic. And if you can just give me a quick answer on the difference between you and Congressman Kaufman.
So I'm not a career politician. I haven't been spending the last 30 years trying to get elected. I'm a father. I'm a product of the American working class. I worked in construction to put my way through college. I've served honorably in the Army.
ስለ ኢትዮጵያና ኢትዮጵያዊነት በሆኑ ማህበራዊ ፖለቲካዊና ኢኮኖሚያዊ መድረኮች ሁሉ አባይ ሚዲያ ይገኛል። እርሶም በዝግጅቱ ወቅት የሚያስተላልፉት መልእክት ወይንም ሐሳብ በመላው ዓለም ለሚገኙ ኢትዮጵያኖች በጥራትና በፍጥነት እንዲተላለፍ ከፈለጉ ምርጫውን አባይ ሚዲያን ያድርጉ። ዝግጅት ሲኖሮት በስልክ ቁጥራችን 617 669 2407 ይደውሉልን ወይንም በኢሜል አድራሻችን live@abbaymedia.com ይጻፉልን በፍጥነት ይደርሰናል። አባይ ሚዲያ ሁሉም ነገር ስለ ኢትዮጵያ።
Combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. In the next 2 years, there are so many things that are going to be on the line, from healthcare to immigration reform to education to international human rights and democracy and our role in the world. And we will not be able to solve these issues, and we will not have a check on Donald Trump by sending Mike Hoffman back to Washington, D.C. He promised 2 years ago to stand up to Donald Trump. He now has a 96% voting record with the administration, the largest voting record of any elected official in the state of Colorado. We need somebody who will defend the values of this community, who will stand up for the working families of Colorado in the 6th Congressional District and deliver on the things that we need to deliver on.
Thank you so much, Mr. Crow. Finally, one, on behalf of Abbay Media, we really want to thank you and your wonderful staff here, Mitch, that really on the last minute that pulled this thing off for us, so we can have an opportunity to introduce you to Mr. Crow. Mr. Crow, any final message you would like to convey to your community here? To your
Absolutely. I learned when I was overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan that the strength in America is its diversity. I've served with people from every different background, black, white, Asian, Hispanic. Some weren't citizens and were wearing the same uniform and the same flag that I was wearing. We are better as a country and a community when we focus on what unites us, not what divides us. And that's what's at stake right now. We are a deeply divided community and nation, and we need leadership that can move us forward and focus on what's best in this country. And I would humbly ask for the support of the people of the community to bring that new leadership to this community and to America.
ክብር እንግዶቻችን እንግዲህ ከዴንቨር ኮሎራዶ በጣም ከባድ ምርጫ በሚካሄደው በአቶ ጄሰን ክሮና በኮንግረስመን ማይክ ኮፍመን የሚካሄደው ዝግጅት ላይ እዚህ ተገኝተን አብራችሁን ስላሳለፋችሁ በጣም እናመሰግናለን። እሁድ እንግዲህ በተራቸው ደግሞ ወደ አቶ ኮንግረስመን ማይክ ኮፍመን ሄደን እሳቸውን ደግሞ ኢንተርቪው አድርገን ወደ እናንተ እናቀርብላችኋለን። እንደገና በጣም እያመሰገንን የጄሰን ክሮ ኦፊስ hopefully in the near future እንግዲህ after the election we will be invited here. And we will be more than happy to reintroduce Congressman Jason Crow again. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again, Mr. Crow.
I'm Segedanu.
I'm a Segedanu.